Why would you trade Brandon Aiyuk right now? Why wouldn't you take the path of least resistance, find a number, give it to him, play out the year, see if you can win that Super Bowl, see how things shake out, and then go from there next year? I don't. There's something more going on, and I just, we got to talk about this today.
We do.
At 888-957-9570. Why would they trade their number one receiver right now in the middle of having a Super Bowl window?
Steiny, it is baffling to me. Norm Johnson, my father told me, son, where there's smoke, there's fire. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you all there's nothing to see here, but I thought John Lynch, who's delivered it every time for the Niners in regard to helping them draft, going to get reinforcements before the season's over and bringing guys in, going back to Emmanuel Sanders days. Last year we saw, some help on the defensive line with Gregory and Chase Young. So I can't come at him, but I always thought they had put some chips or monies away for a rainy day. And I'll never forget when the Niners announced that Brandon Aiyuk was going to be a 49er. I was like, Brandon who? Then we had the great playoffs. Herm Edwards join us and tell us just what type of Rolls Royce he was at the wideout position. And then he comes to town and we watch him play. So, Steiny, I'm looking at you with the same questions, but everywhere I go, the boss, Butcher Boy, they feel like something's going to pop, like Brandon Aiyuk is going to get traded. So it's twofold for me, and I'll throw it back to you. Either Brandon, behind closed doors, has told his representation, I can't put up the numbers here that I know I'm capable of, and if I can't do that, pay me. Show me the money. Tom Cruise, okay? And, Steiny, if they trade Brandon Aiyuk in a year that is so important for Brock Purdy and his progression and making his Sundays easier and Thursday nights, I don't know how the 49ers are going to replace Brandon Aiyuk unless, and I'm using the A word on you, the arrogance of Kyle Shanahan and his prerogative, if he thinks that Jawan Jennings or Ronnie Bell can duplicate in his offense and put up the numbers that Aiyuk has. And I think of the Super Bowl. I think of the playoffs. Brandon Aiyuk never went Jerry Rice, nor did anybody else, but that offense was kind of pedestrian. So that was shocking. And Steiny, I know the draft is tomorrow. I don't expect him to be traded because in no world or scenario can you tell me their offense is better without Brandon Aiyuk, but it's not up to me or you to have that assessment. Kyle may be somewhere right now on the phone with John like, yeah, we got 2 or 3 options. And if they do trade, and let's say they get the first round pick, who's to say they're going to spend that on the wideout position? And that was a point Evan had brought up, Steiny, like they could use some secondary help. They damn sure can use some O-line help. But Brandon Aiyuk, not a Niner? I would be stunned.
Well, here's David Lombardi of The Athletic, because you said one thing, and he addressed this, and it was, how can the 49ers trade Aiyuk and be better? There's just no way, right? This is what David Lombardi said.
Somebody would have to be desperate. You would have to get that inflection point, the deadline pressure, to encourage a team to send something to the 49ers to where they could get a immediate impact player with that pick that would bolster their offensive line right away. I think that's because when I look at this team, I see like one real statistical weakness, and it was the pass protection, namely on the right side. So you would have to, I think, bolster the right tackle spot very specifically. But nothing would be guaranteed. I mean, even if they were able to somehow trade up into the top half of the first round, I mean, to me, it's remarkable that in 2020, they were able to get a top half of the first round pick for DeForest Buckner. They obviously didn't spend it right. I mean, Javon Kinlaw, that never lived up to what they needed from that pick, but the value that they got for DeForest Buckner in that trade was, to me, remarkable, especially in retrospect now that we see what these players are going for. So say that they got something similar for Brandon Aiyuk, and then they nailed the pick, and that guy turned into what Tristan Wirfs was a good example from from 2020. In that case, they could theoretically be better, right? Because their pass protection, the biggest weakness, will have been improved.
So there it is. And let me know what 49er fans think of that at 888-957-9570.
Can I briefly tell you what
basically what he's saying is, if we take a step back at wide receiver, but we take a bigger step up on the offensive line, we could be a better offense.
But what if you paid the chicken to the guy that you think is a future All-Pro and Brandon Aiyuk, and you go get that help you need at the offensive line? See, you never. I'm talking about you specifically. No, we never discussed in the draft. This draft, you got teams like the Cowboys they need a starting guard and center, and they're going to all try to do it in this year's draft.
But maybe they feel like
Aiyuk is replaceable.
They get a better. They have the 31st pick. Maybe they don't like an offensive lineman at 31. I got you. But they like an offensive lineman at 15.
But what's baffling to me, Steiny, is I thought this was going to happen, and Niner fans, after Brock Purdy got his chicken. That's when you could say, hey, you don't have the tinted windows or the rims on the car. You know, it's either or. I never saw a scenario, Steiny, to where this would happen before Brock got his money.
I mean,
like, that's what's stunning me a little bit. I thought they had money for a rainy day.
I thought they did too, and I think they do. I mean, we were all under the impression that the 49ers could pay Brandon Aiyuk a good chunk of change, go through this year with Brock Purdy still on his ridiculously low deal, and then at the end of next year, you take a look at things again, and maybe you're taking a look at things as a defending Super Bowl champion. But when I heard John Lynch the other day, and when I'm hearing what I'm hearing, and we had Willard in yesterday, and I just said to Willard, I just said, it just feels like this feels different to me than the Deebo Samuel negotiation. I just kind of felt like Deebo was going to be back. I do kind of feel like Aiyuk's future is murky. All right, so to me, what that tells me is it's clear, right, that the 49ers, if they're thinking of moving Brandon Aiyuk, which everybody says they're at least entertaining, they must think, right? They must think they can still contend for a Super Bowl without him.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Otherwise, you can't do it, right? So what do 49ers say if that's a truth? And I think it's got to be, right? I mean, if the 49ers are seriously contemplating moving off Brandon Aiyuk, they believe they can still contend for a Super Bowl without him, but getting some kind of trade compensation that makes them better in another area, or maybe they just use the pick on a young receiver in the first round. There's a lot of receivers supposedly in this draft. So 888-957-9570 is the number. I mean, how serious do 49er fans think this is? Are we really going to have Brandon Aiyuk on another team tomorrow night in about 36 hours?
Steiny, I don't think so.
I'd be surprised.
And I'm looking at Vontae out in the hallway, and I was on this train. And the reason I bring him up, Steiny, is early on when the Niners were balling, Vontae said, and I was right there with them, this offense reminded him of the 94 offense. And you can make Rice Debo and Aiyuk, John Tate, whatever. My thing was, I never in a million years could envision a scenario to where, the 49ers would think they could still be prolific offensively. And I know you still got McCaffrey and Kittle, but without Aiyuk and Debo, and it's easy, it's kind of difficult right now, Steiny, to envision life without Brandon Aiyuk, this offense, not knowing who would, take his place or what they would get. But, I mean, gosh, I keep going to Shasky and the boss, and they feel like something's going to pop, and I haven't asked you, Steiny, if you had to bet. You're at the counter. I'm using your thing. You're at the counter right now, and it's, are you getting traded or not? How would you answer that right now? I'm saying no. Not they're not thinking about it, but Steiny, no way.